What's up, y'all? It's GC Kinsey, here to talk about what it's like to experience romantic feelings, situations, and relationships as someone who exists in the gray part of the aromantic spectrum. Before I jump in, I want to set a little bit of context about my romantic orientation and where it falls under the aromantic umbrella. The aromantic spectrum includes people who experience little to no romantic attraction, ranging from aromantics who experience zero romantic attraction to gray aromantics who might experience attraction but rarely or only under specific circumstances, or maybe they're just not sure what romantic attraction is or feels like. One example of a gray aro orientation is demiromantic, meaning you can only develop romantic attraction to someone after you've formed an emotional bond with them first, and that's what I am. Something demiromantics hear a lot is, but isn't that just normal? And I have another video explaining why that's not the case. For this video, I want to give some examples of how I experience and perceive romance as a demiromantic person, because being gray aro shapes my perspective on romance in a way that's quite different from a lot of the typical allo-romantic perspectives, and I think that's the case for a lot of Aro-Spec folks. Even if we may look allo-romantic from the outside, whether that's because we do still feel attraction sometimes, or because we choose to engage in romantic relationships and behavior, we are still Aro-Spec at the end of the day, and we will still experience romance through a distinctly Aro-Spec lens. Romance just feels different for us. So without further ado, here are 5 ways that being on the aromantic spectrum influences how I experience romance. Number 1. I call having a crush the curse. I didn't know the aromantic spectrum was a thing until my mid-20s, but from around age 14 or 15, anytime I got a crush on someone, I would call it the curse. The last time I had a crush on someone, I actually told my friends about it by sending them this.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
And at the time when I first started reacting to crushes this way, I had no idea why I was doing it. I mean, there was no real reason for being so negative. I can understand calling a specific crush the curse if you know that person is all wrong for you but you still like them anyway, or even if you have a type that you frequently fall for who's also all wrong for you. But for every single crush, even when the other person is great, yeah, no, that doesn't really seem like an allo-romantic thing to do. Which of course makes perfect sense in hindsight, but clearly before I could even put words to my Aro-Spec orientation, I had some kind of sixth sense about it. Over time, I've been able to parse out why I think of crushes as the curse. They stress me out. They put my emotions in a state I don't enjoy. They feel like a loss of control. Romantic feelings make the dynamic I have with whatever friend I happen to have a crush on feel weird to me, and that makes it hard to just enjoy the friendship for what it is. For anyone who thinks you can choose your orientation, I am living proof that you can't, because if I could, I would choose to have no crushes at all. But I ended up being demiromantic instead of aromantic, so here we are. I guess I should just be grateful that at least I don't get crushes too often. At this point, it's been 4 years since I was last hit by the curse, so all in all, I'd say that's pretty good. Number 2. I feel uncomfortable when romance happens too quickly. One thing I've learned about myself as a gray aro person is that even though I do occasionally still feel romantic attraction, and even though I'm not romance repulsed, there are still some aspects of romance that make me very uncomfortable, and one of those is when romance happens too quickly. This usually manifests when someone expresses romantic interest in me, but I don't yet know them well enough to have any hope of reciprocating. One example that comes to mind was from my junior year of college. I was at my school's annual fall festival, and when I stopped to listen to one of the live bands that was playing, some random guy came up and asked me to dance. Okay, cool, dancing is fine. I've taken ballroom and swing lessons, so I'll pretty much dance with anybody. Then we ended up hanging out for a few hours afterward and talking, and, also fine. That's how I make friends. But then at one point he just stops and goes, "So, what is this thing happening between us?" And I'm thinking, hell if I know, I literally just met you. And then something similar happened a few months later with a different guy. A few mutual friends introduced us, and we all had dinner together as a group, And then afterward, he sent me a message saying that he wanted to get to know me better and maybe go on a date sometime. And once again, I'm thinking, I have no idea how to respond to this because I haven't known you long enough to know how I feel. Back then, I didn't know about the aromantic spectrum, much less that I was on it. What I did know was that I'd been really sad about my long-term high school relationship ending right before I went to college, and I wanted to have something like that again. You know, I wanted to find my forever person and be in a relationship with them. So I was very confused about why I just couldn't feel anything for either of these perfectly nice guys who liked me. And of course, now I know why I felt nothing. I hadn't spent enough time with either of these guys as a friend to develop the emotional bond that a demiromantic person needs before it's even possible to have a crush. And this might just be a me thing rather than a universal demi experience, but when someone expresses romantic interest that early, before I could even possibly have those same feelings back, that kills any chance of it ever happening from my side. Even if I told the other person, look, I just need more time before I can know whether I feel the same way about you, knowing they already have romantic feelings for me would just put too much pressure on me for that to work. Another interesting thing I've learned is that I don't just get uncomfortable when someone expresses romantic interest too quickly. I also get uncomfortable if I'm already in a romantic relationship and my partner tries to move things along too quickly. An example of that is when my last partner said, "I love you." We had only been dating for 3 weeks when he dropped that bomb on me. And even though he was one of my best friends and I liked him a lot and had very strong romantic feelings for him and was deeply committed to being his partner, hearing that still made me panic inside. Because for me, I love you is something you say to your partner when you want to be with them for the rest of your life, like if you're about to ask them to move in with you or to marry you or something. And after only 3 weeks of dating, I was not there yet, not even close. I had a similar reaction when he mentioned wanting to move to live closer to me instead of being long distance, because again, making big life decisions like that around someone you haven't been dating for very long just does not compute in my brain. So yeah, not only do I need an emotional bond with someone before I can develop romantic feelings for them, but I also need things to move very, very slowly on the rare occasion when I do get into a romantic relationship. I don't know how all you online daters, blind daters, and speed daters do it. Number 3, I feel awkward about romantic gestures. I think this one is half related to my Aro-Spec orientation and half related to gender dysphoria. I haven't been romantically involved with anyone since I started transitioning, so all my romantic experience was before that. From the gender dysphoria perspective, I'm a non-binary transmasculine person who is into men and fellow masculining NBs. So before I came out as trans, being attracted to dudes meant I got shoehorned into straight relationship dynamics. And that subconsciously made me feel weird about being on the receiving end of romantic gestures that men typically make toward women. Things like having my partner open doors for me, especially car doors, like how is that convenient for anybody? Or pull out my chair for me at restaurants. Or the worst one of all, pay for everything on our dates. I cannot even express how much that bothers me and how much more comfortable I am when we either split the bill or take turns treating each other. I remember when I was dating my last partner, we went to the state fair together, and when we walked through the area with all of the carnival games, every single person who was working a booth started shouting out things like, "Hey, don't you want to impress your girl? Come over here and win that pretty lady a prize." And I was just cringing inside and feeling like I couldn't get out of there fast enough, and I had no idea why at the time. From the Aro-Spec angle, being uncomfortable with romantic gestures was a lot like the expectation versus reality problem I described in another video about my asexuality. I would always see couples doing cheesy romantic things for each other and think it was really cute and dream of that happening to me one day. But when it actually did, it made me feel so inexplicably awkward. When I was in high school, my partner at the time got me a bouquet of roses for our 6-month anniversary, and I remember being torn between feeling like, oh, he got me flowers, that is so sweet, and just feeling awkward about it for no apparent reason. Then later in my early 20s, when I was dating my other partner, I felt a similar way when he offered to buy me a car. I didn't have one, and he knew that was a hindrance for me, so I know that offer came from a place of kindness, but at the same time I was freaking out and thinking, dear God, please don't give me a gift that big. And I haven't just felt weird about receiving romantic gestures, but also about giving them. The same partner who offered to buy me a car, I gave him flowers for Valentine's Day one year, and guess what? I felt just as awkward about giving flowers as I did about receiving them. Another time, I took him to a park, sat him on a bench, and played and sang a song that I had written for him, and the whole time I was torn between feeling joyful and proud in that moment versus feeling oddly embarrassed about the whole thing. And it's not always consistent. There have been some romantic gestures that I've been genuinely happy about. One example was when my high school partner randomly pulled his car over during a rainstorm and asked if I wanted to get out and play in the rain. And we ended up running around the parking lot and dancing together and getting completely drenched, and I enjoyed every second of it. Another example was the way my other partner confessed his feelings for me. He told me that he thought I was an angel and a goddess, this was pre-transition obviously, and that I was the best person he'd ever met. And even though that was an Anakin Skywalker level cheesy confession...
Are you an angel? What?
Here everything is soft and smooth.
I thought it was really sweet, and I didn't feel awkward about it whatsoever. But overall, between my gender dysphoria and my demiromantic orientation, there's just something that keeps me from feeling the way I've always thought I should feel about romantic gestures. The expectation just doesn't live up to the reality. Oh well. Number 4. I have extremely deep and intense romantic feelings. This one probably sounds a bit contradictory to my first 3 points, so let me explain what I mean. I don't get romantically attracted to people very often, but when I do, it always follows a specific pattern, which goes something like this. I meet someone new, we spend time around each other, get to know each other better, and develop a connection as friends. Over time, I start realizing I like this person a lot and really enjoy their company and want to spend more time with them. And this is the point where I enter the alterous attraction phase, where I'm not quite sure if my feelings are platonic or romantic. So then I wait to see if I'm gonna get hit by the curse. If that happens, I spend more time with the person and start looking for red flags or anything else that might make us incompatible as partners. And if I don't find any, then I have to decide whether it's worth risking a change to our existing friendship dynamic to confess my feelings. You can probably see why I've only ever had 2 romantic partners, because this approach doesn't really lend itself to starting a relationship. What it does mean is that my romantic feelings are really strong and deep and intense before I ever get to the point of confessing them. I've never been able to wrap my mind around the idea of dating someone to get to know them better and see if you like them that way, because to me that's what friendship is for. I couldn't even entertain the idea of going on a date with someone I wasn't already romantically attracted to. This obviously has some pretty big drawbacks. When my romantic feelings do run that deep, it makes confessing them scarier. It makes rejection more painful, and in fact, I don't even want to confess unless I'm reasonably certain the other person feels the same way, because I don't want to deal with the pain of rejection on top of our friendship changing. There were a few times when I felt like I had to confess my feelings to explain why, no, I could not be friends with benefits or a wingman or give romantic advice to a friend I had a crush on, and yeah, that was not fun. I cried a lot. But the worst drawback is, with the past 2 partners I did have, the intensity and the depth of my romantic feelings made it really hard to leave those relationships, even when it was obvious they had long past run their course. My instinct with both of those partners was to try to make it work, even when it wasn't working anymore. Because not only did I know it was going to rip my heart out to lose what we had, but I couldn't imagine feeling that way about anyone else ever again. And all of this is why I would trade being demiromantic for being aromantic if I could. I hate this aspect of how my romantic orientation works. I hate how deep my romantic feelings are, how intensely I feel them, how much pain they cause when things don't work out, and how long it takes me to get over them. My theory is that this happens because I don't experience romantic attraction very often. So when I do, after going months or even years between crushes, it makes those feelings seem that much more intense by comparison. I've had some people mistake me for being frigid or not emotionally invested or afraid of commitment based on everything I talked about in points 1 through 3. But I think, as you can see from point number 4, I am the complete opposite of that. If I have a romantic partner, I am heavily invested in that person, sometimes even to my own detriment. Being on the aromantic spectrum doesn't mean I feel romantic feelings to a lesser degree. I feel them to an extremely strong degree. They're just a lot slower than usual to develop. And I'm curious whether it's the same way for any other gray arrows out there. Number 5. I seek out fictional romance, but avoid it in real life. This definitely feels like one of the most arrow-ish things about the way I perceive and experience romance. I've reached a point where I don't want to be in a romantic relationship. I'm not seeking out a partner. I might consider it if I ever get hit by the curse again, but it's unlikely. However, I gobble up fictional romance like candy. I think it's a common misconception that Aro-Spec folks hate romantic fiction and only want to consume media with no romance. Of course, some Aro-Spec folks are romance repulsed and they don't want to see any romance, fictional or otherwise. But that's not the case for all of us, and definitely not the case for me. Fictional romance is my jam. Now, do I hate it when romance is shoehorned into a story for no reason, or when a romance isn't very well developed and is just an obvious excuse to get two good-looking actors to kiss on screen? Of course. Do I wish there were way more stories that focused on other kinds of love and relationships than romantic ones? Absolutely. But I also binge rom-coms and romance anime like it is nobody's business. Yes, even straight ones, though of course I prefer the queer stuff. If you follow me on Instagram, or if you've watched any of my cosplay music videos, you probably know how much I enjoy using cosplay to portray my favorite romantic fictional ships. I spend ungodly amounts of time on AO3 guzzling romantic meet-cute, fake dating, and soulmate AU fanfics, and writing plenty of my own slow burns full of mutual pining. Yes, I am that kind of trash, and if you understood a word of that sentence, congratulations, so are you. In the expectation versus reality video that I mentioned previously, a lot of folks brought up agosexuality in the comments. Agosexuality is a subset of asexuality defined as a disconnect between oneself and a sexual target or object of arousal. And while I don't consider myself agosexual because I don't have any sexual targets or objects of arousal, I just enjoy fictional sex scenes for the entertainment factor, I would more likely say that the ago label does apply toward romance for me. Unlike fictional sex, I do use fictional romance as a source of fantasy. I don't want romance in real life, but I do enjoy still vicariously feeling those feelings sometimes. And what better way to do that than to read about fictional characters being in romantic relationships so I don't have to be in one myself. Alright, that wraps up my list of ways that I perceive romance through an Aro-Spec lens, and shows how being demiromantic has shaped my romantic experiences. And now it's time to turn the conversation over to you. If you're on the aromantic spectrum, how do you view romance? How does your particular orientation along that spectrum influence your view? What challenges have you faced living in a world full of amatonormativity? And if you're not on the aromantic spectrum, I would be very curious to hear, what is romance like for you? Regardless of your orientation, what questions do you have about all of this? Drop a comment below and let's get a discussion going. You can also reach out to me on other social media. I am GC Kinsey across all platforms. And while you're here, feel free to check out some of my other videos. I have more vlogs like this one about my experiences as a queer person, along with cosplay music videos, makeup tutorials, pre-testosterone voice recordings, and more right here on this channel. So make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss anything new. And with that, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your support. I hope you learned a lot, and I will see you on the next one.